In the wake of World War I, the Middle East was irreversibly transformed. A vast empire that had spanned centuries, the Ottoman Empire, crumbled, giving rise to the modern Middle East we know today. But this transformation came at a great cost, as new political entities, borders, and conflicts were drawn, often with little regard for the region's rich diversity and historical complexities. David Fromkin's A Peace to End. All Peace takes us on a journey through this turbulent period, exploring how the decisions made by European powers during and after World War I set the stage for the conflicts that continue to shape the Middle East today. The Ottoman Empire, once one of the most powerful and enduring empires in history, was in a state of decline by the early 20th century. After centuries of rule, internal dissent, nationalist movements, and external pressures had taken their toll. When the Ottoman Empire entered World War I on the side of the Central Powers, it did so in a desperate bid to survive. However, its entry into the war marked the beginning of the end for the empire.
The Ottomans were a declining empire, but they still controlled vast territories across the Middle East. They had been trying for decades to modernize and hold together their diverse subjects, but the winds of change were too strong. World War I would be the final blow.
By 1918, the Ottoman Empire was defeated. But its fall was not simply a military defeat. It was the collapse of an entire political and social order that had dominated the region for centuries. While the Ottomans were being defeated on the battlefield, European powers were already making secret plans to carve up their territories. Two key agreements, the Sykes-Picot Agreement of 1916 and the Balfour Declaration of 1917, would lay the groundwork for the modern Middle East. In 1916, British diplomat Sir Mark Sykes and French diplomat François-Georges Picot secretly negotiated a deal to divide the Ottoman-controlled territories between France and Britain. These borders would later become the foundation for the modern states of Syria, Iraq, and Lebanon.
The Sykes-Picot Agreement was a quintessential example of European powers treating the Middle East as a geopolitical chessboard, with little regard for the ethnic, religious, or cultural makeup of the region. This decision would sow the seeds for future conflicts.
Meanwhile, in 1917, the British government issued the Balfour Declaration, promising support for the establishment of a Jewish national home in Palestine. This promise would further complicate the region's political landscape and set the stage for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. When the Ottoman Empire officially ended in 1922, the Middle East was left in turmoil. New states were formed, often with arbitrary borders drawn by colonial powers, creating artificial divisions that ignored long-standing ethnic and sectarian boundaries. From the ashes of the Ottoman Empire arose modern states like Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and Palestine. But these states were not born out of local consensus or historical precedent. Instead, they were the result of agreements made thousands of miles away in European capitals.
The creation of these new states was more about the imperial ambitions of Britain and France than the desires of the people who lived there. The artificial borders drawn in these negotiations would have profound consequences on the future of the Middle East.
After the war, the victorious powers gathered in Paris to shape the post-war world. The Treaty of Versailles, which officially ended the war in Europe, was signed in 1919. But the peace process that followed would only lead to more instability and conflict in the Middle East. David Fromkin argues that the peace settlement that ended World War I was not a true peace, but rather the creation of new tensions. The European powers, instead of seeking a lasting peace, carved up the Middle East with little consideration for the people who lived there.
The idea of a peace to end all peace was an illusion. The borders and decisions made during and after the war planted the seeds for the conflicts that would continue to destabilize the region for the next century.
The arbitrary borders, the competing promises made to different ethnic and religious groups, and the colonial ambitions of European powers left the Middle East in a state of perpetual conflict, a legacy that continues to this day. Nearly a century later, the effects of the decisions made after World War I continue to shape the Middle East. The borders drawn in Paris, the promises made in secret, and the shifting balance of power have led to decades of instability, conflict, and division. The Middle East remains a region defined by its fractured political landscape, with ongoing struggles over borders, resources, and identity.
Fromkin's book shows us how a flawed peace treaty, one that ignored the complexities of the region, created a legacy of conflict that remains unresolved. The decisions made in 1919 continue to echo throughout the region, shaping the geopolitics of today.
The fall of the Ottoman Empire and the creation of the modern Middle East was not just a political shift, it was a historical pivot that changed the lives of millions and continues to shape the future, a peace to end. All peace reminds us that the road to peace is never simple, and that the past, especially one filled with broken promises and hidden agendas, continues to haunt us. This is not just a story of the past, it is a story still unfolding today.